energy. Would you take it from there, talk to us a little bit about it, and take us through your slides?
I can have the slide.
They are up.
Yeah, and that wasn't the first slide. I ran into this initially when I was working and funded a fellow that was doing suspended animation at the University of Washington. And at that same time, or shortly afterwards, I ran into this video, which I think is a remarkable video. This is proof positive that we are now controlling energy to be able to destroy vehicles 2 to 5 kilometers away in 3 seconds. And this is a demonstration. They sent 20 different remote piloted vehicles against that destroyer, and each one was destroyed within 3 seconds, as you see, simply by pressing a button. Off, please. And the example here is that instead of going out to sea with a ship that had 80 people and $120 million in cruise missiles, they went out with 1 laser and 8 people and destroyed everything in 3 seconds each. Why do I care about this as a surgeon? The answer is that the software that controls that laser from such a great distance can also control that laser in the opposite direction at the cellular level. And I think, next slide, please, that the next generation in healthcare is controlling electromagnetic energy. The electromagnetic spectrum goes all the way from gamma rays and X-rays all the way to the long waves down at radio frequency and so forth. When you think about it, next slide please, if we go back 2,500 years, man was the measure of all things. How many feet did you walk into this building? Feet, you know? How far is a meter? It's the distance from your nose to the tip of your finger. 1453, the silk trade had to have a measure that people could have. Everything was relative to me because we had no instruments that could see farther or shorter. Now we've got technology and instruments that allow us to get down to that particular level. Next slide. If we can control this energy, you can put energy into a system. The difference between what gets reflected back and what's absorbed provides your diagnosis. This is called spectral analysis and Raman spectroscopy and so forth. And then you can go ahead and now that you know exactly what the diagnosis of that individual cell is, then you can turn on the high power part of your laser, for example, and be able to go ahead and destroy that tissue. This cycle is 5 milliseconds. That's a complete operation on one cell. That means that I can do 1,200 operations in 1 second, 120,000 operations in 10 minutes. In my 40 years of surgery, I've only done about 15,000 operations, but today I can do 10 times the number of operations that I did in an entire career, but in 10 minutes. And that's because the power is, as you get smaller and smaller, the laws of physics kind of invert. And ones that applied at the macro level are less important than one at the micro level. And this is why Richard Feynman won his Nobel Prize. And particularly because of his lecture in 1959 at Caltech, there's room at the bottom, which means that we now look at the basis of life as the flow of electrons. What's the difference between you and that table that you're sitting at? You are in constant energy change. That table is static. There's no flow of electrons. Many of the lectures that we heard earlier today about stem cells, genetic engineering, and so forth are at the molecular level. But what's a molecule? A molecule is an arrangement of various atoms held together by the energy. And just small changes in energy can change that molecule. All you need is a small change in configuration or the dropping off of one of the ligands, and you have a completely different balance. I remember talking to Mark Roth about the suspended animation, and he said to me, I think the basis of life is the flow of electrons. Does that mean that if we have a disturbance in our dynamic range within our stability, does that mean that we are in a disease state? That may be what the fundamental basis is. And right now, we've gone from controlling things with knives and drugs down to controlling things with genetic engineering and viruses and so forth. But perhaps we should go down to Feynman's level, to the atomic level, find the appropriate wavelength of energy and be able to directly stimulate the cells that are involved through imaging technologies rather than doing drugs or doing genetic engineering or doing surgery even. Now, this doesn't mean that the others are going to go away. They're going to be critical adjuncts to the where we go. But if you look at the fundamental principles, and I was always reminded of Henry Ford. Henry Ford said, when I asked the people what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. That's not the purpose. So we have to rethink from the beginning. Believe in Yogi Berra. The future is not what it used to be. Go back to fundamental principles and reinvent medicine, but with tools that have been available to us only recently because of the measurement technologies that are available, and be able to say, okay, well, let's relook at this from the energy spectrum level. And if I could just have 1 minute or two, can I have that next video? Yes. This is high-intensity focused ultrasound. When the yellow dot went on, it coagulated the tissue in the middle of that lens. Went right through all the other areas in just the very precise spot that it would need it. Next slide. The military was interested in this and said, could we non-invasively stop internal bleeding in our wounded soldiers? And so this is a model of exsanguinating hemorrhage where you lacerate the artery of the pig internally. So here is the ultrasound, and they have just lacerated the artery. And now you see all the red blood coming out. But because they had high-intensity focused ultrasound, they pressed the button, coagulated the tissue, and there's no more bleeding. Does that sound familiar? No, nothing. They just directed the energy on the blood vessel and stopped the bleeding. Just like Star Trek. But it's here because it's hard science. It's about being able to control the energy so precisely with the new technologies that are available that we can non-invasively do things that previously required drugs or medications or surgery. And final slide, please. An area that is going to be very exciting in the near future is something called plasma or cold atmospheric plasma medicine. It's like when lightning strikes and it generates a whole host of different energies. Next slide. And these are the things that many of those who are physicians realize what is in that ball of energy that's created that will be able to affect biological tissues. So in summary, it's all about controlling energy very precisely and being able to focus that at the area of disease and be able to turn on and turn off various molecules like angiogenesis for healing or blocking cytokines and so forth that we've heard in the previous lectures.
Great,
and I'd like to ask a question. And this was brought to me by a microbiologist. As you know, we've got not only bad bacteria, but we now have good bacteria, probiotics. And he asked me a question. He said, why are you indiscriminately killing all of the good cancers along with the bad cancers? And I said, I didn't know we had good cancers. And he said back, and you didn't know we had stem cells anywhere outside of the testes or the ovary until 20 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.